next story takes us to Israel, to one of the most outstanding research institutes in the world.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the 2009 Nobel Prize in Chemistry Professor Ada Yona.
מחקר פורץ דרך של מכון ויצמן גילה כי וירוסים יהודיים.
As far as I know, there have always been women among the scientists at the Weizmann Institute.
The secret of all this is really to bear in mind, I am a woman, I want to be a top scientist.
To follow their instinct and their wish to do whatever they like to do best.
For me, I remember myself still being very young, having in mind this notion that I would like to be a scientist. I never thought that it's going to be difficult, it's going to be different. I thought this is what I would like to do.
The reward of having discovered every day a new phenomena, having a new idea that you can challenge either experimentally or discuss with your colleague is great.
My name is Ruth Schertz-Cheval. I do cancer research, and specifically I'm looking at the interactions between the cancer cells and the cells in their environment, help the cancer cells grow and turn into a tumor.
My name is Raina Rosenzweig, and I am a young PI at the Structural Biology Department at the Weizmann Institute. We work with protein aggregates that are characteristic of Parkinson's disease and also the alpha-beta fibers, which are characteristic of Alzheimer's. And our idea is to understand how the proteins that are naturally found in the body can break those apart and therefore cure the disease.
My name is Meital Oren. And what I'm doing is related to neurobiology. I'm basically studying and asking how do the differences between males and females arise, but at the level of the neuronal connections and the circuitry.
I think the Weizmann is doing an investment for later years. They take young scientists doing their own research in managing their own lab.
From all the places in Israel, the Weizmann Institute is definitely the leading place. It has really great atmosphere.
Increasing the amount of women that can enter into science and into the academia, it's extremely important.
And only in such a place where you get all these people together and you get them to interact, will new ideas come from and new ways to approach problems we couldn't solve in the past.
The Weizmann Institute stands out as a beacon of scientific excellence, of scientific progress. The technology and research being done at the Weizmann Institute is benefiting people across the planet.
It was founded by scientists and it's run by scientists. It therefore has a spirit or an understanding that science is not a profession. Science is a lifestyle. It's something that you take with you to whatever you do.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Karine Kwenskali, and I have the privilege of serving as the National Chair of Weizmann Canada's Women for Science. My Women for Science colleague, Vice Chair Laurie Cohen, and I would like to sincerely thank you for joining us this evening. Laurie will join us a little later in this event, an exciting evening focused on reinvention. Reinvention has never been more critical than it is today. Some of you may be aware we had originally planned to host Arlene Dickinson and Dr. Daphna Rothschild in May this year in Montreal at an in-person event. Of course, the pandemic changed all of that, and we find ourselves instead gathering here today on our screens across the country. The reimagining of this event is actually the outcome of an ongoing reinvention of decades-long work at Weizmann Canada, supporting women in science. As challenges persist for women in science, this reinvention includes the expansion in both scale and scope as our growing group of both women and men focus on first, empowering more girls and women to pursue careers in science, encouraging more conversation to tackle ongoing challenges, especially new ones presented by this pandemic, as well as working with women business leaders like Arlene Dickinson, alongside scientific leaders to both empower and inspire interest in science. The worldwide reality is that while levels of PhD students are getting closer to a 50-50 split between genders, when we look at senior level scientists leading labs, that number drops significantly, down to just 20 to 30% representation of women. And in some disciplines, it's much lower. That's a problem. And that's part of the reason why our work continues through initiatives such as today's Women for Science event. Weizmann has an over 70-year history at the forefront of scientific discovery. And since 1964, Weizmann Canada has been helping us fuel these critical discoveries. Critical discoveries that are made possible by some of the brightest minds in the world, like the award-winning Dr. Daphna Rothschild. Daphna is currently a postdoctoral fellow at Stanford University, focusing on solving the genetic code of the human ribosome. She grew up in Tel Aviv and had a passion for science from a very young age. She completed her BSc at the Tel Aviv University and her MSc and PhD at the Weizmann Institute of Science. During her PhD, she focused on the interaction between bacteria living in the human gut, namely the gut microbiota, and human health. She found that the gut microbiome composition is mostly shaped by environment and found many links between bacteria and human health, including in diseases like diabetes and obesity. Daphna is also a recipient of the National Postdoctoral Award Program for Advancing Women in Science. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Daphna Rothschild.
Hi, I'm Daphna Rothschild, now a postdoc at Stanford University, and I want to share my scientific journey with you. From a young age, I was exposed to science. My dad is a professor at Tel Aviv University, and I have a strong memory as a girl of coming with my dad to his work, catching a mosquito, putting it under a thin glass slide, and watch it, still alive, under the microscope. It was transparent, and I could see its heart beating, and I loved it. I majored in computer science, economics, and biology in my bachelor's studies in Tel Aviv University. For my master's and PhD, I decided to go to the Weizmann Institute of Science, where great science, interdisciplinary science, is performed by world-leading experts. I did my master's at the lab of Uri Alon, studying E. coli, and my PhD at the lab of Eran Segal, studying our gut bacteria that live inside us. I find it fascinating how we carry bacterial alien residents that in some way control our everyday lives. I gained expertise in bioinformatics, statistics, and machine learning, and a love for germs. Coming towards the end of my PhD, I went to a unique student-organized meeting in Weizmann. Weizmann encourages students to meet face-to-face with scientists, and in this event, I have met Maria Barna, a leading female professor at Stanford University that gave an eye-opening talk about ribosomes. I heard her talk and told myself that this is what I have to do, and today, I'm a postdoc in her lab. So what are ribosomes, and why should you care about it? Have you heard the word ribosome before? You probably heard about the Nobel Prize winner, Ada Yonat. She's a chemistry professor, also from Weizmann. Ada Yonat was the first to visualize a tiny, but a very important molecular machine, 200 times smaller than a grain of sand, that appears in millions in a human cell. I haven't yet explained what is a ribosome. I will get to that soon. But first, let me explain a few things. The human body has different organs, and zooming in, these organs are made of cells performing distinct jobs. Different cells make different proteins. For example, in the muscle, the myosin protein is needed for muscle contraction. And in immune cells, antibody proteins are secreted to fight bacterial infections. And in the gut, digestion proteins are used for digesting food. What causes these cells to behave differently? The manual book in each of these cells, which is the DNA genetic code, is the same in all cells. This is like a book of recipes for making different proteins. To get different cell types, different recipes from the book are read to form cell-specific proteins. Returning to the ribosome is a magnificent complex machine that knows how to read a recipe and bake a protein. Like in this illustration, the recipe is read from one side and a protein comes from the other side. Different read recipes result in different produced proteins. Going back to the conference where I have met Maria Barna, she pointed out that although the primary function of the ribosome is the same for all organisms, from bacteria to humans, that is, to make these proteins, the ribosome underwent massive evolution. While the bacterial ribosome is compact, the human ribosome has almost doubled its size with expanded structures. Additionally, while there are only a few types of ribosomes in bacteria, there are thought to be many in humans, and their sequence is unknown. Could it be that different ribosomes are doing different things? Are they involved in deciding which proteins to make in the cell? Until now, it was mostly ignored that different ribosomes even exist. And it is unknown if the variation within these ribosomes are functional. It could be that only one variant is used millions of times and the rest are not. However, there are hints that the ribosomal variants are important. In the Barna lab, they showed that one of the expanded structures of the ribosome controls the speed of protein production, and that a fast protein production is more error-prone. It is unknown, for example, if ribosomes in the brain are the same one used, like in cancer cells. In the brain, it is important not to make errors, as the accumulation of bad proteins may lead to diseases like Alzheimer. And perhaps there, a small ribosome makes fewer mistakes. In contrast, cancer cells need to grow quickly, and there it may be that speed is what matters, and a fast ribosome is used. It is thought that there are hundreds of ribosomal variants. However, the sequence code for the hundreds of different ribosomes is unknown. It's almost completely missing in the DNA cookbook, like blank pages that are waiting to be found. I hypothesize that different ribosomes exist that actively control which proteins are made in different organs to form complex organisms like ourselves. Now in my postdoc, I analyze human genomic sequence data to find new ribosomes. To illustrate this challenge, I'll use the DNA cookbook analogy. In this cookbook, there are not only recipes for different proteins, but everything that makes us human is written in this cookbook. This includes the recipes to make the different ribosomes. Except that here, the first recipe for how to make a ribosome is written in full. The rest are blank. It's like having a recipe for bread. But now, while in the table of content, it is listed that there are 100 pages of brand variant recipes. When opening the book, the first has a recipe, but the rest 99 pages are blank. The reason why there are blank pages is that current sequencing methods don't provide recipes, or at least not complete ones, but instead, they only give us words. And building a recipe from a list of ingredients is a hard problem. To read a recipe, the sequencing machine gave back bananas, walnuts, and pecans. But it's unknown if the book contains one recipe of banana bread with both nuts, or the ingredients actually belong to two different recipes, one for a banana bread and another for a nut bread. It's a simple example, and perhaps a chef could improvise, but baking a human is a mystery. To solve this hard problem, I'm using statistical methods with improved sequencing techniques. Solving it correctly will enable me to target found ribosomes and ask where they are expressed in our body. Deciphering ribosomal variants is fundamental for understanding who we are, and it could also have important clinical significance. For example, a ribosomal variant present in cancer cells could enable a very early cancer prognosis. I did my PhD not on ribosomes, but on gut bacteria. But the computational and statistical methods that I have learned taught me how to analyze DNA sequences. And now in my postdoc, I study the genetic code of the ribosome. Although over 20 years have passed since Ada Yonat has solved the structure of the bacterial ribosome, it is yet to be discovered if the human ribosome regulates protein production in different organs. Following my postdoc, I want to go back to Israel, to the Weizmann Institute of Science, and open my lab to computationally and experimentally test for ribosome genetic heterogeneity, to understand how cellular decisions are made with the potential to change our understanding of genetic regulation in humans and disease processes.
Thank you very much, Daphna. It's always so exciting to hear about these groundbreaking discoveries. Daphna will be joining us a little later for a Q&A session where we will dive in more into her science and her journey. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Joanne Nemiroff and Arlene Dickinson. Our wonderful Joanne Nemiroff serves on our Weizmann Canada Board of Directors, a role she began in 2005. She is a notable leader in the retail industry with over 30 years experience in the field. She has held executive positions with many Canadian retailers such as Holt Renfrew Ogilvy, Limited Brands, Sears Canada Inc., La Senza Corp., and Aldo Canada. Joanne's business expertise brings fresh idea to Weizmann Canada's national board, and earlier this year, her notable leadership was also recognized by receiving the Weizmann Canada Outstanding Leadership Award. We are incredibly fortunate to have her as part of our leadership. Incidentally, Joanne and Arlene are friends, so it's lovely to host a gathering with both of them. Arlene Dickinson is the CEO of Venture Communications and the general partner of District Ventures Capital, a venture fund focused on helping market, fund, and grow entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial companies in the food and health space. She is a best-selling author, accomplished public speaker, and is best known for her role as a dragon/venture capitalist for 15 seasons on the multi-award-winning television series Dragon's Den. Arlene's leadership has been recognized many times, including Canada's Most Powerful Women Top 100 Hall of Fame, the Pinnacle Award for Entrepreneurial Excellence, as well as Profit and Chatelain's Top 100 Women Business Owners, among many other distinctions. She sits on several public and private boards and is actively involved in supporting the community. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Joanne Nemiroff and Arlene Dickinson. Arlene, I'm so excited to speak to you. Your book was phenomenal. I read it in 2 days. I have to say that the level of vulnerability in that book astounded me. And it was written in a very approachable way. Did you have that in mind when you wrote the book? Was that your go-to emotions?
You know, I just think when you're writing a book, and it's a book about your own experiences, that you can't not be transparent and honest about what's happened. And while that can be really scary and difficult to do, because it's always, you know, you put it out into the universe and you just hope people will understand. I think it's the right way. You can't talk about reinvention if you don't talk about your own kind of journey.
My question is, you have a podcast called Reinvention.
Yeah.
I'm going to subscribe to it very soon because I was so curious about what's next after reading your book. And considering what's happening in the context, I'm using one of your words from your books, in the context of COVID right now, do you think that people can find happiness again in terms of reinvention? How hard is it to have that happen? Reinvention has never been so relatable and so on point right now. What can we do to find happiness? Is it possible?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that this time in the world and what's happening with COVID is a really, it's been a moment for us all. It's allowed us all to take a pause and to have time that we didn't have before because we were all so busy and running around and, you know, always overworked and overscheduled. And now we've had this pause. And this in that time, we've had the ability to really think about what matters to us personally. And I think that when we think about what matters to us personally, we start to examine our lives differently and we start to think about the world in a different way. And so I look at COVID for me. I mean, while there has been an enormous amount of stress, an enormous amount of uncertainty and fear, there's also been an opportunity for all of us to really think deeply about what matters to us, what we want to do with our lives, how we want to spend our time, and what our purpose is. And I guess if there is a silver lining in this, I would say it is that I have seen people connecting more to their friends, to their families. Yes. They're connecting less to, you know, this notion that busyness is what defines us. And they're becoming stronger, I believe, through the adversity. And, you know, adversity is a funny thing. While we're in the middle of it, it seems impossible, but as we're going through it, it actually helps us come out the other side much, much stronger.
That's absolutely true. And following that, when people are thinking about reinvention, you spoke about how far do they go into your book. And I found very interesting because you said that we don't start out from scratch. But can you give an example of where you start for people who haven't read the book?
Yes, I mean, I break it down into 4 pretty simple steps, but it is a process. And sometimes, you know, people think, well, I just want to tell myself, I want to be, you know, blah, I want to do this X thing and that it can just happen. But it's actually a very disciplined process and it's something that anybody can do. So I break it down into the concept of, you know, this notion of you, first of all, you have to look backwards in order to look forward. So you take some time to kind of take a self-assessment of your life and what's gotten you to where you are today. And people don't like to do that. We don't like to look backwards. We don't want to think too much about the past. We always want to think about the future, right? Right. It's really important to put context in place around what has happened in your life. And so you do this, it's counterintuitive, but you go backwards in order to go forwards. And then I talk about finding your currency. And when I say currency, what I mean is, you know, the thing that you're good at. We're all good at something. We all are good at, you know, it could be, I've been canning lately and I've decided that I'm actually a pretty good canner. And, you know, people saw that on Twitter. I know you can actually make a business out of candy, but I mean that's the point, that we all have skill, we all have talent, and we need to think about what it is that we're good at and what it is that our skills are. And then the next thing I talk about is core purpose. And we talk a lot in life about finding your passion. And I think that's okay, sure, find your passion. But I actually think what's way more important is finding your core purpose. What is that thing that gets you out of bed every day? Your why. Why do you do what you do? Who are you? And once you find your purpose, then you are, of course, going to be passionate about it because it's what matters to you. And I think, I just think it's one of those things that we all forget, that purpose matters. Your why matters. And then finally, I talk about context. If you think about your past and you think about what you're good at and you think about your purpose, and then you put it all into the blender and think about the world we're living in and the context of what people are going through and what's happening, you can reinvent yourself into today. And I think, there's a lot of times, women in particular, we worry about our age. We worry about our stage. Is it too late for me to do something? Is it too soon for me to do something? Am I, we have ridiculous notions from everything from body imaging to, like whether I'm pretty enough, thin enough, tall enough, smart enough, all these things. And women put an enormous amount of pressure on ourselves, but really all we need to do is be okay with ourselves. And when we find our why, when we find our purpose, I think we start to realize that anything is possible, and that what other people think about us isn't as important as what we think about ourselves.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Joanne, can we hear you? Maybe you can come back in with a question. I don't think the sound
there. I got it.
You got it? Wonderful.
Go ahead. Thank you. Okay. Arlene, we're all facing different realities, background, genders, age. Does the clock run out on reinvention as we get older? And are there limits as to who can reinvent themselves?
Absolutely not. I mean, listen, I started a fund when I was 57 years old. I'm now 63. I'll be turning 64 in a few weeks. And I can tell you, I'm never afraid to say how old I am, because I am the age I am. And I don't know why we have this notion that somehow it's like taboo to talk about our age. Our age is a part of our journey. And it's, and that learning we have from life, I think, is so incredibly valuable. And this notion that only the young, that the world belongs to the young. Well, yes, it belongs to the young, it belongs to the middle-aged, and it belongs to the old. And all of us have a place, and all of us can reinvent ourselves at any time. And, I think Asian cultures and other cultures have a better sense of respect and interest in what seniors and older people have to say. That's one part of it, but the other part of it is I think there's nothing stopping us at any age from doing whatever we want. Physically, I can't do the same things, perhaps. I try, but I can't. And I'm okay with that. And mentally, I might forget a few names for sure, but that doesn't stop me from being able to reinvent myself and to be able to live the life that I want to live as fully as I want to live it. And I think that's true for anybody. I don't think it's ever too late.
That's wonderful. You looked at the past to uncover the seeds for your reinvention. What were the seeds that you found in the past for your reinvention?
For me, it was coming from a place of, we were immigrants to Canada, and we came here with really absolutely nothing. And so for me, being grounded in values was very important, and learning to kind of measure myself against myself as opposed to against other people. And while that is really hard to do, and I know it's easy to say, like, don't worry about what anyone else thinks about you, only worry about yourself. I've learned over time that that's one of the things that I've had to bring with me, is learning to be okay with who I am and accept who I am. And I think once you do that, you have freedom.
Wow. One of the things that you wrote is that we are conditioned as women to play supporting roles. but we have to be comfortable being the star of our own movie. Okay, so given you've done Dragon's Den, you understand that, but how can the rest of us take that?
Well, women by nature are very nurturing, and we love to take care of other people. Our gender is a nurturing gender. I think that's one of the things I think is a strength of women, is that we love to nurture and take care of others, but often that puts us in a place of a support as opposed to of leadership. And I think that you can be very caring and nurturing while still being a great leader. And that's one of the things that defines great leadership is vulnerability, the ability to help others, the ability to encourage others. So listen, I don't think that, I don't know, Joanna. It's a really tough question, because I personally feel like it's a good thing to not to be the star in your own movie, but sometimes I do think it's incredibly hard for us to take center stage, and
100%.
and maybe with age, it might be, for the people who are joining this cast. I think with age comes this understanding that, when you're younger, you want the world to notice you, and it becomes kind of pay attention to me because of your looks generally, or because of you're trying to accomplish something, which we're hopefully moving away from this notion of, physical appearance being why we get attention. I really hope we are moving away from that. I believe we are as women. But then we kind of get into the stage as you get older where you become less about that and more about kind of what you're offering into the world, because you suddenly realize that you only have yourself to bring to the party. That is what you have, is you. So I don't know. I think everybody's a star in their own movie, and we just need to accept it. If you're in a relationship or in a place where people aren't letting you be a star, then I think you have to ask yourself, are you in the right place? And maybe that's a bad thing to say right here, but I don't know.
No, I get it. No, I get it, because I think sometimes we do move to that supporting role and think that's the best for us, and we don't put ourselves forward. We don't, as they say, lean in or, try to take the center stage. And I think that, I do believe also with age, you become more comfortable being either way.
Yeah.
And that happens.
But having said that, I know an amazing young women who are so much more confident and strong than I was at their age. It's so wonderful to see these young women who are breaking barriers and changing the dialogue, and saying that I can do all these things. They're owning homes on their own. They're traveling on their own. They're doing things that I was told I couldn't possibly do on my own. So I love that the narrative is changing. And it can't change fast enough as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. One of the things you talk about is that fear of judgment from others is one of the reasons that we hold back from reinventing ourselves. You address this vulnerability by saying, big surprise, feeling vulnerable wasn't as awful as I thought it would be. Tell us about that time for you. How did you get over that vulnerability, and have you really gotten over the vulnerability?
It's funny. We were talking earlier about when I wrote the book and what it was like to be vulnerable in the book and to admit the things that I did and put it out into the world. And having written 3 books now, I've told more and more of my story. And I learned that, we're always afraid to admit we have weaknesses. We're afraid to admit that we're not perfect. We're afraid for people to kind of look under the covers to see who we really are. But what I've learned is that the more I say what I'm going through, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, I have anxiety issues, that when I say these things and I say to people, I'm suffering from anxiety, which is a new thing for me, by the way, which has happened only in the last year. If I say and I admit that I'm having anxiety, what comes back to me is this enormous amount of support. And I don't think it's because it's me. I think that people recognize that they can see in me what they can see in themselves. They can see in you what they can see in themselves. We can see in each other that we're not abnormal. We're not alone with either anxiety or depression or fear or insecurities. We all have them. But when we say it out loud, it's like it's like everybody just breathes a sigh of relief and says, oh, thank goodness. I thought I was the only person that had that awful thing. But in fact, everybody clearly has it. So I don't feel as alone. And then by admitting it, you also feel stronger somehow. By saying you're vulnerable and being vulnerable and saying you have weaknesses, you become stronger. It's exactly opposite of what you think is going to happens. And I really love that. Now I say that, but Joanne, I can sit here and tell you that I'm still very insecure. I still suffer from, I still judge myself. I look at myself. I think, oh, I need to do, whether it's lose weight or should I change my blonde or gray hair now back to red? Should I, why am I red right now? Like what's going on? Like all these things, and I'm being but that's what we do to ourselves. We judge ourselves in the harshest of ways. And so I still have insecurities, but I've learned to just blow by them.
Okay. Do you think that COVID has brought up more anxiety among people?
Yes, for sure. For sure. I think there is going to be a mental health epidemic that is happening and is going to get worse. And this is why I think it's very important to have conversations about how we can support each other, about how we can say when we're feeling lost or afraid or concerned about the state of the world. I mean, if we don't talk about it and we just sit in our own minds, it becomes overwhelming. And I would encourage anybody who's watching this show to really think hard if they're struggling to try and not get so much in your head, but to talk it out with a friend or to find through exercise or through diet, to find a way to try and help yourself, but always reach out for some help if you're feeling overwhelmed, because I think many people are really struggling right now. It's very worrisome.
I agree. I think we all thought it was 2 weeks, 2 months, or whatever that was. And now we're 6 months into it and it's getting beyond us. So I do think everybody, on the call in their own life should reach out to people, because that's for sure something people are feeling.
Yeah.
One of the seeds that you talk about for your reinvention was about food. And I wanted you to tell us about your interest in food science, because I know it has led to an important new business endeavor that you're very excited about. So wanted to hear more about it.
So when I was younger, if I go back to, you asked me about kind of finding my why and my purpose and what I learned from my past. And because we grew up very, very poor, groceries were something that was a bit of a treat in our house. It wasn't like just go to the grocery store whenever we ran out of food. We would just run out of food and then, would have to wait until we could have enough money to go to the grocery store. And when we did go, it was very staple driven. And so I would say that food became a very big part of my life because we didn't have food security, and we didn't always didn't eat healthily as a result of that, and on top of that. And so when I got older and started to think about, my health and my weight and my energy levels, I realized that I was not living as well as I could, and that there was this need for me to think about what I was consuming to take better care of myself, because I wanted to grow old well, or as well as I could, given my, by biology. On top of that, I started looking at the country and saw that Canada was a place where there was all this wonderful ingredients. We were growing things. We had, like all sorts of grains and all sorts of great products that we were growing and ingredient based, but then we would ship them to other parts of the world and they would turn them into products that we would then buy back and consume. And that made no sense to me. And I thought there was an opportunity for Canada to feed the world, and to feed ourselves, to feed Canadians, and to help feed the world. And we are a vast country with an enormous amount of resources, an enormous amount of opportunity in the food and health space, an enormous amount of skill. The agricultural and health industries in Canada are, the top employers in Canada, and we have huge skill in there, but we haven't really turned it into creating products. So I started a fund and I raised $100 million, and I now invest in the food and health space. And I am helping Canadian companies to grow their businesses and to help feed each other and to help feed the world. And that's, to me, that's my purpose.
That's terrific. Arlene, I loved one of your final quotes in the book was the world can use better versions of all of us right now. And I agree 100%. And I think kindness and all of those things you brought up, support, are key as we go forward. So thanks, Arlene. And now I wanted to bring in Dr. Daphna Rothschild back to the discussion and to open it up for questions.
Hi.
Hi there. At this time, I want to encourage, if you have questions for both Arlene and Daphne about reinvention, leadership, science, or any other things that we discussed, to send an email to jan@weizmann.ca, and Jan, and hopefully we'll see those coming up on the screen soon. I'm looking for Jan here to see if there's questions. I have a question for Daphne while we're waiting. Women scientists face challenges in receiving enough support to explore their postdocs, because generally that means traveling abroad, studying abroad. You have to move yourself, your family, and that can be very difficult. You're a recipient of the Weizmann Israel Postdoctoral Award. Tell us about what that is and what really that has done for you on your scientific journey.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for having me over. And I'm really honored to speak in an event that promotes women. And I have to say that that's a major driver to everything that I do, because in science, it's difficult. You know, it's really competitive, and there aren't that many positions. So, you know, at least I want to continue in academia, and it's tough. You need to succeed, and you are getting a grade. You need to publish papers. They need to have a big impact. You need to be cited. And you know, science takes time. So you have your project, and you don't know until a very last end of it if you will succeed. And there's a lot of uncertainty, and many of us fail. And at least for me, one major landmark feeling that I need to do this was when I received in my PhD an award, also a Women in Science award. And it was a small award, relatively small. But what was really amazing about it was that because it was like a family giving the award because their daughter passed away from cancer, and the daughter loved science, and now the family wants to cherish that and also encourage women to continue. And I had a talk with the mom. She asked me to sit for lunch after I was awarded the award, and she told me how important it is for her that I continue. And that was so major for me. It was so important. You know, it's not about the money. We're not here to make money in academia. We are here to do something that we love. But because it's competitive, there's a lot of stress involved. And knowing that you're not doing this only for yourself really lowers the level of anxiety. Knowing that someone believes in you makes you believe in you as well. And at least for me, that award was really important. And that also goes now for the Weizmann Award. Really knowing that I have support, and really know someone telling you, listen, we believe in you, and you're not doing this because you have a good potential, but we also because you're a female scientist, and we want you to succeed. We want that other kids will, when they think of what is an image of a scientist, they will have you as a female in mind. And for me, it's really important. It really helps me overcome challenges, because science is not only fun. So when it's not fun, I still tell myself that, but it's important.
Absolutely. Women leadership in all areas is critical, because what we see is what we hope for and what we believe we can do. So Thank you. I have a question here for Arlene. It says, Arlene, I love Reinvention. Thank you for having the courage to be so open and honest about your personal discovery. I totally relate to identifying myself as wife, mother, partner, and now grandmother. You mentioned to be vocal about our age. However, society tends to put older women in compromising positions by diminishing our value and our wisdom that we're too old to contribute, which ticks me off. It makes it a challenging to create change and make contribution. Do you have thoughts on how older women can overcome this stigma? By the way, I love your hair color.
Thank you. Well, I want to say two things. Thanks for the question. I want to just quickly say something to Daphne. I have enormous respect for scientists, and never in our world has it been more important for women like you to stand up and continue doing the work you're doing. We need science in such a meaningful way. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
Listen, I think the challenge with women and our age starts less with how people view us and more with how we view ourselves. And it is it's hard. Like, it's hard not to feel less than. It's hard to age and realize that, hey, you kind of become invisible in a room, and people aren't paying attention the way they used to in terms of what you're saying. And you have to be a little more forceful. You have to be a little more confident, but it can also be very diminishing. Like, if you allow that thing in your head to say, I'm older and therefore I'm not relevant and therefore I don't count, it just becomes it becomes self-fulfilling, and it piles on itself, and it starts with the tape that goes in our own head. So you do have a lot to offer, no matter your age. And you can't allow, just like Daphne's talking about scientists and people needing to see her succeed as a scientist, we need more older role models as well, so that younger women can see that there is a future for women, no matter your age, that there is a chance to be visible and to be important and to stand for things that matter in this world, especially now. And I think those value systems that we bring with us and our voices as elder statesmen is incredibly important in the world today. We need to stand up as leaders, and that leadership comes from a place of certainty about who we are and what we believe in. So don't ever let yourself feel diminished.
Finally, given that women are being very much affected by COVID-19, do you have any final words of advice in terms of people who are looking at reinvention, how to start or what's required? Daphne, I'll start with you. If you have any final words of advice.
Of how to invent oneself?
To reinvent oneself.
Yeah. Well, I guess that I also, Arlene said it earlier, it has to do with being okay with yourself. If you feel good about yourself and you don't put so much, I guess, basically what I'm trying to say is that to reinvent yourself, eventually you have to have a very strong ground and have a plan B. But to have a plan B, you also kind of are also okay with it. That's kind of saying that no matter the outcome, you will be okay. You are willing to take the risk because you know that maybe the risk is not maybe a huge leap. You're agreeing to do it one leap at a time. I had to change the subject for my post. I didn't have to, but it's very common when you're doing in academia to completely reinvent yourself, and it's a very big risk in terms of profession, because everything went well in the PhD and now you have to do well again, but it's a new field. But still, I think that it really helps, that feeling that it will be okay. There are other things that I will accomplish in case I fail. So we moved from Israel. My kids now speak English. It's only half a year here. So you if you are willing to accept that it's a journey and you will learn from the journey, then it's not a complete failure if things don't work. You can grow from wherever you end. And it may be, you thought you started from point A and you want to reach point B, but maybe you will reach point C. And it's not what you had in mind, but it's something new and you're fine with it. So if you suck it in, you know that's what's going to happen and you're okay with it, then you can't really lose.
Yeah, I love that. I love
Great.
that. I think when I think of the darkest periods in my life where I wondered how I was going to be able to carry on, I always thought of the worst case scenario, and it was always about how to face other people. How to, what happens if I make a fool of myself and everybody sees it, or I fail at something and everybody will start to judge me. And then I start to realize it just doesn't matter, even though we think it does. And I actually want to make a point on reinvention that I think we forget about, which is creativity is critical to reinvention. And one of the things I would encourage everybody to do in terms of the steps, first read the book, because the book is a real step-by-step guide to how to reinvent yourself. But we have lost this notion. When we were kids and we would play, we would take a box and turn it into, it was a spaceship, it was a stove, it was an outfit. We could take a marker, a crayon, whatever, and we could sit and talk and just be creative. And in that creativity, we solved things. We found joy. We found ourselves because we were expressing ourselves. And you cannot reinvent yourself if you're afraid to express yourself. And so I would encourage everybody to, get on the floor and play with some kids. It's a simple thing, but just play with some kids. Find your creativity. Find that joy that they're seeing and how they see the world. And you will start solving your own problems by seeing the world through their eyes. And I am a big believer that creativity, it gets lost as we get older and older and older, because we start to get told what normal is and what good is and what right is. And we start to lose this imagination. And imagination is critical, because you have to imagine yourself as something different, or you'll never be able to be that something different. And Daphne, and what she does every day as a scientist, is being creative. She's applying science, but she's doing it in a creative way. And I think it's really important.
Thank you, guys. I'm sorry, I've got a lot of questions, but we don't have any time left. So I have to wrap it up. So I wanted to just turn it over to Weizmann Canada's Women for Science Vice Chair Laurie Cohen, really to bring the evening to a close. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. I'm sure we all felt united tonight and enjoyed it. Okay, this is one of the more enjoyable things that we've done, certainly in the last number of months. So thank you for your comments. And now over to Laurie Cohen.
A heartfelt thank you to Arlene, Joanne, as well as Daphna for this timely discussion on reinvention. My name is Laurie Cohen, and I'm the Vice Chair of Weizmann Canada, Women for Science. On behalf of my Women for Science colleague, Karen Cohen-Scally, who you also met earlier, we want to sincerely thank you for participating today. Arlene's experience is perfectly summed up in this quote from her book. I wasn't sure which direction we needed to head or how we'd pull it off, only that we had to try to change course immediately. At this uncertain time, I'm sure that's a feeling many of you have also felt. It's also the core of why I'm part of Weizmann Canada's National Women for Science initiative, to support some of the world's brightest minds, including Dr. Daphna Rothschild. During the pandemic, science has gone through a reinvention of sorts, with trust in science in Canada reaching all-time highs. The Weizmann Institute of Science has also expanded from one lab prior to the pandemic focused on coronavirus to now over 65 labs. Weizmann has an over 70-year history at the forefront of scientific discovery. And since 1964, Weizmann Canada has been helping fuel solutions to change the world. Women for Science builds on decades of work promoting women and science. That critical work continues through our network of women and men seeking to address the new challenges being presented, and by partnering with business through leaders and influencers to seek new solutions. I encourage you to connect with Weizmann Canada to get involved. You can also lead the way by investing in solutions for our world at weizmann.ca/give the world. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening.